Outdoor cooking ceremony. Large metal grills were being positioned in the recreation area and enormous quantities of raw meat, more than she'd seen in years, were being arranged on wooden tables. "What are they doing, nurse?" Sachiko Tanaka joining her at the window. The two women had been prisoners for 6 weeks since their capture on Okinawa, long enough to adjust to the shocking reality of American captivity. Comfortable facilities, adequate food, and treatment that contradicted every warning from Japanese military propaganda. "I think they're preparing food outdoors," Akko replied, studying the scene with the analytical precision that had made her an effective intelligence officer. "But the quantities are enormous. That much meat would feed a regiment in the Imperial Army." Through the window, they watched Sergeant Davis demonstrate the grill setup to other American personnel, explaining something with animated gestures while smoke began rising from charcoal that glowed with intense heat. The smell that drifted toward the barracks was unlike anything Akiko had experienced: smoky, savory, fundamentally different from Japanese grilling methods. "In Japan," Sachiko said quietly, "we grill fish and vegetables over small charcoal braziers. Meat is rare, and when we do cook it, we use thin slices over high heat. This looks barbaric." The word hung between them. Barbaric. It matched Japanese propaganda descriptions of American culture: crude, excessive, lacking the refined aesthetics that define Japanese cuisine. Yet the Americans preparing this outdoor feast moved with practice deficiency, suggesting tradition rather than primitive improvisation. "Ladies," called Corporal Mitchell from the doorway, speaking in the careful Japanese she'd been learning, "you're invited to American barbecue celebration, Independence Day tradition. Food will be ready in 2 hours." Barbecue, Akko tested the unfamiliar English word. "What is this outdoor cooking method?" Mitchell explained, switching to English. When her Japanese failed, "We grill meat slowly over low heat with smoke. Very traditional American celebration food." After Mitchell left, the Japanese women gathered to discuss this latest unexpected aspect of American culture. The camp held 43 female prisoners. Nurses, communications specialists, intelligence personnel captured during Okinawa's final defense. Most had expected execution or brutal imprisonment. Instead, they'd found facilities that exceeded Japanese military standards. "Should we attend?" Sachiko asked the assembled group. "This barbecue ceremony, we should observe American customs," Akko decided, speaking with the authority her former rank still carried among the prisoners. "Understanding our captives helps us survive captivity." But as the afternoon progressed and the smell of smoking meat intensified, Akiko's pragmatic reasoning gave way to simple hunger. Japan had been starving for years, with meat rationing so severe that most civilians hadn't tasted beef or pork since the war began. Now American guards were preparing quantities of meat that seemed almost obscene in their abundance. "Lieutenant Yamada," Sachiko whispered, "is it wrong to want to eat food prepared by our enemies?" Akko had no answer. She'd sworn to serve Japan unto death, had believed that capture meant dishonor, but 6 weeks of American treatment had challenged every assumption about enemy character and intentions. If Americans could be generous with housing and medical care, could they also be generous with this extravagant outdoor feast? As sunset approached and the barbecue preparation reached its conclusion, Akko made her decision. "We'll attend," she announced to the assembled prisoners. "We'll observe this American tradition and try to understand the people who defeated us." What awaited them at the American barbecue would challenge not just their assumptions about enemy cuisine, but their fundamental understanding of food, culture, and the society that could afford such abundance even during wartime. Recreation area had been transformed into something resembling a festival. Long tables covered with checkered cloths held an array of dishes Akiko couldn't identify, while the grills, she counted 5 of them, produced steady streams of smoke that carried complex aromas of wood, char, and seasoned meat. "Welcome, ladies," Sergeant Davis greeted them in English, gesturing toward the food displays. "Today we celebrate American Independence Day with traditional barbecue. Please take plates and try everything." the Japanese prisoners approached. Cautiously studying the offerings with the weariness of people encountering alien customs, Akiko examined the grills, where thick cuts of meat, beef ribs, pork shoulders, chicken pieces cooked slowly over glowing coals. The preparation method bore no resemblance to Japanese yakuri or yakiniku. This was meat on a scale and cooked with a patience that seemed to contradict American stereotypes of hasty efficiency. This piece is beef brisket, Davis explained using tongs to lift a massive slab of meat that had been smoking for hours, cooked low and slow with hickory smoke, traditional Texas barbecue method. He carved thin slices that revealed a pink smoke ring beneath charred exterior, then arranged them on a plate alongside what he called pulled pork meat so tender it fell apart into strands. Akiko accepted the plate with both hands in a gesture of respect, though her mind reeled at the portion size. This single serving contained more meat than many Japanese families had seen in months. Try it with barbecue sauce, Mitchell suggested, indicating a dark, tangy-smelling liquid in a bowl, Kansas City-style tomato based with molasses and spices. Akiko took a tentative bite of the brisket without sauce first, wanting to taste the meat itself. The flavor was unlike anything in her experience, smoky depth that penetrated throughout, tender texture that dissolved without chewing, a richness that spoke of long, patient cooking over carefully managed heat. She closed her eyes involuntarily, and when she opened them, found Sachiko staring at her with an expression mixing hunger and apprehension. "How is it?" Sachiko asked in Japanese. "Extraordinary," Akiko admitted, taking another bite. "Smoking process creates flavors I've never encountered. It's not like our grilled fish, it's something completely different." Before we discover how this barbecue revelation changed everything these Japanese prisoners believed about American culture, tell us where you're watching from around the world. We'd love connecting with our global audience as we explore these incredible stories of culinary diplomacy during wartime. Drop your location in the comments below. Within minutes, all 43 Japanese prisoners were eating American barbecue with varying degrees of amazement. Conversations erupted in rapid Japanese as they compared notes on flavors, textures, and the shocking abundance of meat being casually served to enemy prisoners. "This pulled pork is incredible," observed Kiko Sato, a former naval nurse who had rarely eaten pork even before the war. "How do they make it so tender?" "Hours of slow cooking," explained Davis, who had been listening to their Japanese conversation with patient incomprehension. "Pork shoulders smoked for 12 to 14 hours at low temperature. The smoke and time break down the tough meat until it becomes tender. 12 hours, Sachiko's voice carried disbelief. They cook meat for 12 hours for barbecue? Yes, it's not about speed, it's about flavor and tradition. Americans have been cooking like this for generations. As the evening progressed, Akiko found herself analyzing the barbecue with the same attention she'd once applied to military intelligence. This wasn't crude outdoor cooking, it was sophisticated technique, requiring patience, temperature control, wood selection, and deep understanding of how smoke and heat transformed meat. Lieutenant Sachiko approached quietly. "May I ask you something personal?" "Of course. When you taste this food, this abundance, this expertise, does it change how you think about the people who defeated us?" Akiko considered the question while watching American personnel laugh and serve prisoners with casual generosity. "Yes," she admitted. "Finally, it changes everything." Dark gives you the barbecue celebration continued late into the evening, and as American personnel demonstrated their cooking methods with obvious pride, Akiko began to understand that this outdoor feast represented something more significant than mere food. It was cultural expression, community ritual, and tangible evidence of American abundance that contradicted Japanese propaganda about enemy weakness. "Sergeant Davis," she approached the grill master in her careful English, "may I ask about your cooking method?" "In Japan we grill thin meat slices quickly over high heat. This low, slow smoking is very different." Davis's face lit up with the enthusiasm of someone asked about his passion. "Barbecue is about patience and smoke flavor. You can't rush it." the low temperature around 225 to 250 degrees lets smoke penetrate deep into the meat. While collagen slowly breaks down, rush it with high heat and you get tough, flavorless meat, but 12 hours of cooking. That requires much fuel and constant attention, worth it for the result. Davis replied, adjusting vents on his grill to control airflow. Barbecue is weekend tradition for American families. We gather friends and relatives, cook all day and share meals together. It's not just food, it's how we build community. The concept fascinated Akiko. In Japan, elaborate food preparation was reserved for special occasions or professional restaurants. The idea that ordinary families would spend entire days cooking meat as social ritual suggested a relationship with food and community that differed fundamentally from Japanese approaches. In my country, she said carefully, such cooking would be wasteful. The fuel, the time, the quantity of meat, all would be considered excessive luxury. Maybe before the war, Davis acknowledged, but in America, we can afford to cook this way because our agricultural and industrial systems produce abundance. It's not wasteful if the resources are available and the community benefits from gathering together. Over the following hour, Akiko and several other prisoners received informal barbecue instruction. Davis showed them different wood types: hickory for strong smoke flavor, applewood for sweetness, mesquite for intense smoke. He explained the Texas crutch technique of wrapping meat in foil during cooking, demonstrated how to maintain consistent temperature, and described regional variations in American barbecue styles. Texas is known for beef brisket, he explained, North Carolina for pulled pork with vinegar sauce, Kansas City for variety and thick sweet sauce, Memphis for dry rubbed ribs. Each region has traditions going back generations, so many regional styles, Sachiko observed. In Japan we have regional food variations, but I never considered that America might have such culinary complexity. The comment reflected a broader realization spreading through the prisoner group. Japanese propaganda had portrayed Americans as culturally inferior, lacking the refinement and tradition that defined Japanese civilization. Yet here was evidence of culinary sophistication developed over centuries with regional variations. Reflecting geographic and cultural diversity, Lieutenant Yamada called Nurse Yuki Tanaka, who had been examining the side dishes accompanying the barbecue. You should see these preparations: coleslaw, potato salad, baked beans. Each one requires specific techniques and recipes passed down through families. Akiko joined her at the side dish table, studying preparations that revealed attention to detail she hadn't expected from supposedly crude American cuisine. The coleslaw had been dressed with precise vinegar to oil ratio. The potato salad contained multiple flavor layers, and the beans had been slow-cooked with bacon and molasses for complexity that rivaled Japanese numono stewing techniques. This isn't primitive cooking, Yuki said quietly. This is sophisticated cuisine that we dismissed because it looked different from our methods. That evening, as the prisoners returned to their barracks, conversations focused not on the humiliation of captivity, but on the revelations about American culture represented by the barbecue. For Akiko, the experience had been particularly unsettling because it challenged her role as intelligence officer. If her understanding of American cuisine had been so completely wrong, what else had Japanese intelligence misunderstood about their enemy? We thought they were barbarians, Sachiko said as they prepared for lights out, but they cook meat for 12 hours using techniques refined over generations. That's not barbarism. That's dedication to craft that we failed to recognize. Akiko lay in her comfortable bunk replaying the day's experiences: the abundance of meat, the patience of smoking techniques, the community aspects of shared outdoor cooking. All of it suggested a society more sophisticated and generous than Japanese propaganda had ever acknowledged. And tomorrow she would ask Sergeant Davis if she could learn more about American barbecue methods, because understanding enemy culture suddenly seemed more important than maintaining the prejudices that had led Japan to underestimate its opponents. Still 3 days after the barbecue celebration, Akiko found herself assigned to the camp kitchen where American cooks were teaching prisoners about food preparation as part of a broader cultural education program. To her surprise, Sergeant Davis was there, having volunteered to conduct a barbecue workshop specifically for interested Japanese prisoners. Miss Yamada, he greeted her warmly. Corporal Mitchell said you wanted to learn about American barbecue techniques. I'm happy to teach anyone interested in cooking traditions. Over the next 2 weeks, what began as simple cooking lessons evolved into comprehensive education about American food culture, agricultural systems, and the economic foundations that made barbecue abundance possible. Davis proved to be a patient teacher who understood that his students needed context beyond mere recipes. American barbecue exists because we have efficient cattle and pork industries, he explained during one session, gesturing toward diagrams of American agricultural organization. Ranches in Texas and Midwest raise millions of animals. Railroads and refrigerated transport move meat across the country. Packing houses in Chicago process animals efficiently. The entire system creates meat abundance that makes barbecue accessible to ordinary families. Akiko absorbed these details with the focus she'd once applied to military intelligence, recognizing that understanding American food systems revealed deeper truths about the industrial capacity that had overwhelmed Japan. If Americans could create such sophisticated infrastructure for beef and pork distribution, their military logistics must operate with similar efficiency. In Japan, she ventured. During one class, meat is scarce luxury. Before the war, most families ate fish as protein source. Beef and pork were expensive, reserved for special occasions. The idea that American families regularly cook large quantities of meat seems impossible. Not impossible, Davis corrected gently, just different economic system. America invested in agricultural efficiency, breeding better cattle, improving feed production, mechanizing slaughter and processing. We created abundance through systematic industrial development. The lesson went beyond barbecue to fundamental questions about how societies organized resources, prioritized investments, and distributed prosperity. Americans had built systems that made meat affordable enough for weekend celebrations. Japan had prioritized military expansion over civilian prosperity. The contrast explained much about why the war had ended as it did. Could Japanese families learn to barbecue? Asked Sachiko, who had joined the cooking classes with enthusiasm. After the war, when resources become available again, why not? Davis replied, barbecue techniques aren't secret or particularly difficult. They just require patience, practice, and access to meat. If Japan rebuilds its agriculture and food distribution systems, families could absolutely develop their own barbecue traditions. The possibility intrigued Akiko. She imagined post-war Japan adopting American barbecue methods while adapting them to Japanese ingredients and aesthetic preferences. We could try smoking fish, she suggested. Japan has abundant seafood. Applying barbecue techniques to salmon or mackerel might create interesting fusion cuisine. Davis's eyes lit up with genuine interest. That's brilliant. I've never thought about barbecuing fish using low and slow methods, but there's no reason it wouldn't work. The smoke flavors would complement fatty fish beautifully. The conversation sparked experimentation. With Davis's approval, Akiko began testing barbecue techniques on fish obtained from local suppliers. The results surprised everyone. Salmon smoked for several hours at low temperature developed flavors that combined American barbecue sophistication with Japanese seafood traditions. This is extraordinary, declared Yuki after tasting the first batch of barbecued salmon. It's like taking American method and Japanese ingredient to create something entirely new. That's how food culture evolves. Davis observed different traditions meet and create innovations. American barbecue itself came from combining Native American smoking techniques, African cooking methods brought by enslaved people, and European meat preparation traditions, it's always been fusion cuisine. Historical context resonated with Akiko, if American barbecue represented cultural fusion rather than monolithic tradition, perhaps post-war Japan could similarly blend American methods with Japanese sensibilities to create something valuable from defeat. Sergeant Davis, she said thoughtfully, when the war ends and we return to Japan, may I have your permission to share these barbecue techniques with my family? More than permission, Davis replied warmly. I'd be honored if Japanese families adopted American barbecue methods. Food sharing creates understanding between former enemies. If teaching you to smoke fish helps build peace, that's the best possible outcome. August 1945 brought atomic bombs, Japanese surrender, and the end of World War II. In Camp McCoy, the Japanese prisoners processed their defeat with complex emotions, shame over surrender mixed with relief that the killing had finally stopped. For Akiko, the barbecue lessons had become a lifeline, something positive to focus on while her worldview underwent fundamental reconstruction. Miss Yamada, Lieutenant Williams, summoned her to the administration office where she found several civilian representatives from the American occupation authorities were organizing cultural exchange programs for Japanese repatriation. Your barbecue experiments have impressed our staff, and we'd like to discuss whether you'd be interested in teaching food preparation methods as part of post-war reconstruction. The offer surprised her. Just months ago she'd been an enemy intelligence officer. Now Americans were asking her to help rebuild Japan using knowledge gained in captivity. What would this involve, she asked carefully. Teaching Japanese families about American cooking methods, including barbecue techniques, explained Dr. Patterson, a civilian consultant, but more importantly, helping Japanese people understand American food culture so they can make informed decisions about what to adopt and what to adapt to their own traditions. You want me to teach Japanese families to cook like Americans? No, Patterson corrected. We want you to share techniques and let Japanese families decide how to use them. Maybe they'll adopt American-style barbecue, maybe they'll create fusion cuisine like your smoked fish experiments, maybe they'll just appreciate understanding American culture better. The goal is knowledge sharing, not cultural replacement. The distinction mattered to Akiko. She had no desire to erase Japanese food traditions, but she'd learned valuable lessons about patience, smoke flavors, and community cooking that could enrich rather than replace Japanese cuisine. I accept, she decided, but on one condition: I want to document traditional Japanese grilling methods alongside American barbecue techniques. We should create resources that respect both traditions. Excellent approach. Patterson approved. That's exactly the kind of cultural bridge building we need. Over the next month, as repatriation preparations intensified, Akiko worked with Davis and other American cooks to create comprehensive barbecue instruction materials translated into Japanese. The guides covered everything from basic smoking techniques to regional variations, always with notes about how methods might be adapted for Japanese ingredients and preferences. This section on fish barbecue is particularly strong, Davis commented, reviewing Akiko's additions. You've taken American techniques and shown how they work with Japanese seafood. That's real innovation. It's what you taught me, Ak replied. That food culture evolves through fusion and adaptation. I'm simply applying the lesson. Indeed, as her departure date approached, the American staff organized a farewell barbecue that had become both ritual and symbol of the transformations experienced during captivity. Japanese prisoners who had arrived expecting execution now gathered freely with American personnel, sharing food and conversation that would have seemed impossible just months ago. Lieutenant Yamada, Davis approached with a wrapped package. This is for you, a set of barbecue tools and spice rubs for your family in Japan so you can teach them what you've learned here. Akiko accepted the gift with a deep bow, moved by the gesture that represented so much more than cooking equipment. Sergeant Davis, she said formally, you have taught me that understanding former enemies creates better outcomes than hatting The barbecue was just the medium for that lesson, and you taught me that the best cuisine comes from respecting multiple traditions. Davis replied, your smoked fish experiments showed me new possibilities I'd never considered. That evening, as Akiko packed her belongings for the journey home, she carefully wrapped the barbecue tools alongside her other treasures from captivity. The grilling equipment would raise questions from family members who might see American cooking methods as inappropriate for a defeated nation, but Akiko had learned that the strongest societies were those willing to learn from others rather than clinging to pride and prejudice. If smoking fish American style could bring Japanese families together for outdoor cooking celebrations, that seemed like a victory worth pursuing, not a military victory, but a human one that honored both traditions while creating something new. As she drifted towards sleep that final night in American captivity, Akiko reflected on how completely her understanding had shifted. She'd arrived expecting brutality and found generosity. She'd assumed American cuisine was crude and discovered sophistication. She'd thought outdoor meat smoking was barbaric and learned it represented patience and community. The Japanese culture could respect and adapt. The barbecue had been more than food, it had been a teacher of humility, a bridge between enemies, and proof that the most important lessons often come in unexpected packages, served with smoke source and the generous spirit of people secure enough in their own culture to share it freely with former adversaries. October 1945, the repatriation ship carried Akiko and hundreds of other former prisoners back to a Japan transformed by defeat. As the devastated coastline came into view, she clutched the barbecue tools Davis had given her, wondering how she would explain American cooking methods to a nation still processing the shame of surrender. What will you do with those? Lud asked Sachiko, gesturing toward the wrapped grilling equipment. Will your family understand why you're bringing enemy cooking tools home? I don't know, Akiko admitted honestly, but I learned something important in captivity, that understanding our former enemies helps us rebuild better than clinging to the hatred that led us to war. Luri, the ship docked in Yokohama, where American occupation forces had established processing centers for returning prisoners. To Akiko's surprise, she was immediately contacted by occupation authorities who had received recommendations from Camp McCoy about her food education work. Miss Yamada said Captain Morrison, through a translator, we're establishing cultural exchange programs to help Japanese civilians understand American society. Your unique experience, Japanese officer who learned American barbecue, makes you valuable for these efforts. Would you be willing to teach cooking classes in Tokyo? The offer meant delaying her return to her family in Hiroshima, but it also provided purpose and income in a devastated economy where employment was scarce. More importantly, it gave her a way to contribute to reconstruction that honored both Japanese traditions and the lessons learned from American captivity. I'll teach, she decided, but I want to create programs that respect Japanese cuisine while introducing American techniques, not replacement, fusion, and adaptation. 2 weeks later, Akiko stood before her first class of 30 Japanese women in a Tokyo community center. Most were Warids struggling to feed families with limited resources, desperate for any knowledge that might help them survive occupation and reconstruction. Today I'll teach you about American barbecue, she began in Japanese, watching skeptical expressions ripple through her audience. Not to replace our grilling traditions, but to show you techniques that might be adapted for Japanese ingredients. I learned these methods as a prisoner of war, and they changed how I understand food preparation. She demonstrated smoking techniques using fish instead of beef, salmon, mackerel, even sardines. The long, slow cooking over low heat with aromatic wood smoke created flavors that seemed to bridge American and Japanese sensibilities. Her students tasted the results with the same surprise Akiko had experienced during her first Camp McCoy barbecue. This is wonderful, exclaimed one widow, a former teacher named Micho. The smoke flavor enhances rather than masks the fish taste. It's like taking American patience and Japanese ingredient to create something new. Exactly, Akiko replied, pleased that her students grasp the fusion concept. Postwar Japan doesn't have to choose between rejecting everything American or abandoning our own traditions. We can learn from both cultures and create cuisine that honors our heritage while embracing useful innovations. The D over the following months, Akiko's cooking classes became unexpectedly popular. Word spread about the former prisoner who taught American fish smoking and created fusion dishes that respected Japanese aesthetics while incorporating American techniques. Occupation authorities supported the program as positive cultural exchange, while Japanese families appreciated practical knowledge from someone who understood both traditions. You've become quite influential, observed Captain Morrison during a review meeting. Your classes now have waiting lists, and several other cities have requested similar programs. D people are hungry for knowledge that helps them rebuild. Akiko replied, the barbecue techniques give them practical skills, but more importantly, they demonstrate that learning from former enemies doesn't mean abandoning Japanese identity. Bry, as 1945 ended and Reconstruction accelerated, Akiko realized her barbecue education had become something larger than cooking instruction. It was a bridge between cultures, a demonstration that former adversaries could create value through mutual respect and knowledge sharing. Spring 1946 brought warmer weather and Akiko's decision to expand her program. Beyond Tokyo, she traveled across occupied Japan teaching barbecue techniques adapted for Japanese ingredients and sensibilities, always emphasizing fusion over replacement. In each city she encountered the same pattern: initial skepticism followed by appreciation once people tasted the results. In Osaka, she told Sachiko, during a reunion in Tokyo, families are smoking mackerel using hickory wood and serving it with traditional tsukemono pickles. In Kyoto, a restaurant owner adapted my techniques to create smoked tofu that's becoming quite popular. The fusion cuisine is developing organically and the Americans approve, Sachiko asked. She had found work with the Occupation Administration, helping coordinate food distribution programs. They're delighted, Akiko confirmed. Captain Morrison says my program is their most successful cultural exchange initiative because it demonstrates mutual respect rather than imposed cultural change. But Akiko's growing influence also attracted criticism from Japanese conservatives who saw adopting American methods as betrayal of national identity. Anonymous letters accused her of collaboration of dishonoring Japanese traditions by teaching enemy cooking techniques they don't understand. She confided to Sergeant Davis, who had been transferred to Tokyo as a food services consultant, I'm not abandoning Japanese cuisine, I'm enriching it with techniques that work well with our ingredients. Some people always resist change, Davis replied philosophically, but look at your class enrollment. The restaurants adopting your methods.